Bierkarten. In beer cards, there are 16 white beer cards, 16 black beer cards, 16 free beer cards, 16 barrels, 1 starting card, and 4 cards with a German manual. In beer cards, there are also 4 different kinds of beers: pale ale, dark beer, wheat beer, and pilsner. For each kind of beer, there are cards with 1, 2, 3, or 4 beers on them. This is true for the pale ale, as well as the dark beer, wheat beer, and pilsner. This principle not only applies to the white beer cards, but also to the black beer cards. 1 to 4 beers for each kind of beer. And although the artwork is a bit different, it also applies to the free beer cards. 4 kinds of beer with 1 to 4 beers each. Before the match starts, the 3 decks with white beer cards, black beer cards, and the free beer cards are shuffled separately. Now, the first round of the first game begins. Each player receives 2 white beer cards facing up for all to see. Subsequently, each player receives 4 black beer cards face down. Two free beer cards are drawn and put in the middle of the table. When every player has had the opportunity to look at the white beer cards of their adversaries, all players pick up their cards. The winner of the last match, or alternatively the most experienced beer drinker, gets the starting card and begins. Every game consists of 4 rounds. In each round, up to 2 cards may be played. The goal is to reach the highest number of beers. Whoever achieves this goal in a round gets a beer barrel as reward. Now, we'll take you along and show you how to play beer cards. At the beginning of the first round of the first game, the player who currently has the starting card begins. They may put up to 2 cards on the table face down. This is important, always face down. After player 1 has played their cards, it's player 2's turn. After every player has put down their cards, the played cards are revealed to determine who reached the highest number of beers. In our case, player 1 reaches 7 beers with the cards they played. Now, let's have a look at the free beer cards. If a player can match the cards of beer depicted on one or both of the free beer cards, these free beers are added to their played beers. In our case, player 1 not only gets 3 wheat beers, but also 2 wheat beers as free beer, totaling in 5 beers. The same is true for the pilsner. 4 played pilsner and 1 free pilsner make 5 pilsner in total. So, player 1 reaches 10 beers in their turn. Player 2 has played 2 dark beers, does not match any free beer cards, and thus reaches only 2 beers. Player 1 clearly has the higher number of beers in this round, and is rewarded with a beer barrel. At the end of the turn, all played cards are discarded and returned to their respective decks. Two new free beer cards are drawn. The starting card is passed on clockwisely to the next player, and the second round of the first game begins. Player 2 begins and plays 2 cards, as does player 1. Player 2 reveals their cards and calculates the number of beers. In this case, there's no free beer for the pale ale, as it does not match any free beer cards. The Pilsner, however, matches both free beer cards and gets 6 free beers. So, player 2's total of this round is 11 beers. Player 1, however, has played 2 Pilsner cards, so each of the cards gets 6 free beers on top, and player 1's total is a respectable 17 beers. Now the second round is finished, and again, all played cards are discarded and returned to their decks. Two new free beer cards are drawn. The starting card is passed on clockwisely to the next player. Round 3 of 4 starts. In our case, player 1 plays their remaining 2 cards, whereas player 2 does not play any cards and passes. Player 1 reveals their cards, reaching 7 pale ales and 2 wheat beers, and, as their opponent's number of beers is 0, wins the round and gets the next barrel. As in the rounds before, the table is cleared of played cards. The starting card is moved to the next player, and 2 new free beer cards are drawn for the 4th and last round of the first game. The second player starts and plays 1 card. Player 1 is out of cards and has to pass. As player 2 turns their card, it becomes apparent that they win this round with only 1 beer. With player 1 not having any cards left, this was an easy win and player 2 gets the beer barrel. Now, after the 4th round, the first game has finished. One match of beer cards always consists of 3 games. Subsequently, the second game starts. To prepare for the second game, all free beer cards are returned to the deck and the deck is shuffled. The decks of black and white beer cards are shuffled as well. Then, every player is again dealt black and white beer cards. As before, the white beer cards are dealt facing up. In contrary to the first game, where everyone received only 2 white beer cards, everyone receives 3 white beer cards in the second game. There's no change in dealing the black beer cards. Every player gets 4 black beer cards. Before the game starts, again, everyone has the chance to look at the white beer cards of their opponents before picking up their own cards. Two free beer cards are drawn, and the 4 rounds of the second games are played. When the second game is finished, the played cards are returned to their respective decks, and the 3 decks of white, black, and free beer cards are shuffled again. The second game is now finished, and the third game is being prepared. Whoever gained the most beer barrels at the end of the third game wins the match. When dealing the cards of the third game, the amount of white beer cards is increased again. Everyone receives now 4 white beer cards, facing up. The number of black beer cards never changes. 4 black beer cards are dealt to every player. A short recap. 2 white beer cards in the first game, 3 in the second game, and 4 in the third game. After a moment of looking at the other player's cards, everyone picks up their cards again. 2 free beer cards are drawn, and the first round of the third game begins. When reaching the end of the third game, every player counts their beer barrels to determine the winner. In our example, player 1 was able to collect 8 barrels in the course of the match, while player 2 has only collected 4 barrels. Consequently, player 1 wins the match by a distinct margin. Now, we want to explain 3 special cases that might occur while playing beer cards. The first such occurrence is a draw. If, like in our example, player 1 and player 2 reach the same number of beers, there is a draw. In our case, both players have 9 beers. Now, the players have to choose between 2 possibilities. The first possibility is to agree to the draw. In that case, both players receive a beer barrel. The second possibility is to keep playing and to compete for the barrel. In that case, every player may play a third card, starting with the player who has the starting card. After every player has turned their cards, the number of beers is counted again, and the winner gets the beer barrel. If the rare case occurs that there is again a draw after turning the third card, like in our case, where both players have 4 additional beers, there is no possibility to play another card. In such a case, the draw cannot be decided and both players receive a beer barrel. The second special case that might occur is that there are cards left in your hand after the 4th round of a game. In our example, it is the 4th round of the first game, and player 2 plays 2 cards, as does player 1. Player 1 wins the beer barrel, but still has 1 card left when the first game is finished. As usual, the decks are shuffled and the cards for the second game are dealt. However, player 1, who has 1 black beer card left, only receives 3 black cards to a total of 4. There are always only as many cards dealt as are needed to have 4 black beer cards in your hand at the beginning of a game. Player 2 has no cards left and thus receives 4 black cards. Since this is the second game and no player has any white beer cards left, both players are dealt the regular number of 3 white cards. The third and last special case occurs when, after the 4th round of the third game, the last round, 2 or more players have the same number of beer barrels. If this is the case, there is a showdown between these players. In our example, player 1 and 2 both have 6 beer barrels at the end of the match. Player 1 still has 2 cards in their hand, whereas player 2 has no cards left. To prepare for the showdown, the deck with black beer cards and the deck with free beer cards are shuffled. Every player receives as many black beer cards as necessary to have 4 black beer cards in their hand. In our case, player 2 is dealt 4 cards. Player 1, who still has 1 black card left from the third game, only receives 3 cards. No white beer cards are dealt. However, cards left in a player's hand may be kept. 2 free beer cards are drawn, and both players try to win the deciding barrel by playing their best cards. Whoever wins the barrel wins the match. In our case, player 1 wins with 19 beers against player 2, who only has 14 beers. Thus, player 1 receives the 7th barrel and wins. In the very unlikely case that a showdown ends in a draw, there has to be played another showdown to determine the winner.